Welcome to Wise Beyond Bitcoin, your home for the crypto neo, news, education, and opportunities. My name is Ryan.
My name is Lucas. And as you know, we love to cover not just the innovation and latest going on in blockchain and crypto, but we also love to cover the macro outlook, the economic outlook, and how it all ties together. We've been especially covering the inflation and the Fed actions and how that relates to the economy at large. And I guess without further ado, there's some latest news from Powell and what that means for blockchain and crypto, for the economy, and where the opportunities will be and how you can find them. But what's going to create those opportunities is probably some more corrections and pain. We'll see.
Yeah, right. So one of the things that we always like to talk about is the Fed's wording, right? The narrative, how they're using language to shape expectations and you make the point that they get as much effect out of their words as they do out of the actual policy tools, whether it's interest rate policy or adding or subtracting to the balance sheet, that these actions are powerful, but there's also a lot of power in the press release and how they use language. And there's a lot of people whose entire occupation is bound up with monitoring the minute changes in language that comes out of the Fed and trying to parse all this for a meaning and guide to the future. So with that as the background of the purpose of this, we're highlighting a shift in the narrative from the Fed. It's from the major mouthpiece, Chairman Powell, and how the Fed is talking about the risks from the recession risks from their policy changes, right? So this is about their new language, and the key term here, the key language that we're wanting to highlight is that they're essentially saying there's no guarantee that we're going to be able to get inflation down without impacting the labor markets and the real economy as a whole, right? So the idea here is that there's no guarantee that the fight against inflation won't also be a risk to recession, right? The recession could follow. And we have some data coming out recently that kind of confirms that this is a tendency, this is something that's happening. So, we got any thoughts about that? But that is a big change in their language from just a few days ago.
You pretty much covered it, but that's why we stay on top of not just the Fed policy changes, but the announcements along the way. Because if you've been following this channel, if not, and you're interested in staying abreast of these changes, subscribe, notification bell, all that good stuff, right? But why does it matter is because you're able to see the direction they're trying to steer the ship. Even if slowly, they use their words and language to soften the blow, but you can see the direction that they're moving. And the direction they're moving is to control price stability, which I think they mentioned in this article or somewhere else as a as a chief concern, without regard to, in the short run, the labor market or other areas that could lead to a recession. Now, we've been following and talking about the effects of rate hikes and what that can do for the policy. And as you mentioned, and why we like to talk about the economics in traditional markets and in connection to blockchain and crypto, is because there are other solutions that can affect prices in markets. And as you've mentioned for a while now, and others have too, that with the state of the economy the way it is right now, that Fed can only do so much with rate hikes, and that reducing taxes on imports and exports can do a lot more for price stability than rate hikes. And as you've mentioned, and of course, subsequently, we've the Biden administration has come out and recognized that that's something that they will look into. But the reality is that seems to be more effective, and to not look at that could, as you mentioned before the video, we could start seeing the Fed could be exacerbating the problem.
Right. Yeah, I think that goes to the heart of the issue, is that a lot of what's driving this inflation problem is not purely a monetary cause, right? Certainly there has been a lot of money growth after the pandemic, but is with that, there's been a disruption in supply chain. There's been a lot of supply chain shocks, whether we're talking about COVID shutdowns or issues with the logistics and the freight and shipping, or we're talking about the Ukrainian war and disrupting supply chain, and that on that side of the world. So there's a lot of supply shocks happening, and when you raise interest rates, that's not going to help increase the supply of anything really, because these companies, their production is going to be reduced when the supply of credit is reduced, and so that you can see that it's going to make it harder for them to expand. It's going to make them harder for them to pay for their inputs and their costs, and it makes it more expensive for them to borrow, and so everything is impacted. Resources become less free essentially, and cost more, and the supply of things starts to become an issue, and that's not going to be solved right by what's going on with the Fed, with inflation, with driving up the interest rates. So like you say, the other solution would be to try to reduce those tariffs and get the supply chain, get the movement of goods and services to be kind of expand, increased, right, and subsidized relative to not, by reducing those taxes, right, and that would immediately reduce inflation. So it remains to be seen if they go that route, but we do know that the Fed is making it clear that they're more worried about restoring price stability than they are about causing a recession, and all their language is gearing us to get ready for that. That the soft landing is probably not going to be in the cards. They're not guaranteeing it. So read between the lines. If they're not guaranteeing it, they're more or less saying, that's probably what's coming. And if you look at the data in the economy,
we're about to go into the data, but this is also a segue as to and what we want to mention, we'll follow through, is this is also where you're going to find some of the greatest opportunities in crypto and in blockchain right now, because what you're seeing is a tightening in the market, which we've been talking about, as many have, and you're seeing a deleveraging. There's margin calls, asset prices are going down, which means the value of the collateral is going down, which means you're seeing a deleveraging. And we've Three Arrows Capital, we've mentioned hedge funds and a lot of the turmoil that's going on in the markets. This is a natural cleansing process during these recessionary times. So if you're aware of it, this is some of the greatest opportunities are going to take place, I feel, over the next 6 months to a year, however long, if it takes this period lasts, because what we'll continue to follow up on is there's actually a lot of activity despite the contraction in the economy and other things happening. There is a massive amount of growth and activity in blockchain, in cryptocurrency, in decentralized apps being built. And there are many happening right now, and some that haven't even come about yet that are still to be invented over the next year or two that could revolutionize the market. So it's really couldn't be a more opportune time to follow the projects, because in a bull market, it's easy to confuse a bull market for brains and to see the prices of everything going up and not knowing what is legitimate and what's unsustainable. Right. Yeah. And so this is a healthy overall, while it seems like it's kind of a dark period with layoffs and recessionary times coming about and inflation. It's kind of like the medicine that's necessary to get the engine going again and get the growth. Right. But it's also the best time to take a look and do an oil change and change the tires and fix things up and get ready before you get it on the road again. So this is do your research, start learning about Web 3.0, getting involved, participating, and seeing which of these communities are growing. We'll definitely keep you abreast of what's going on in crypto and blockchain and the economy. That's our nerdy passion, is economics.
Well, and there's a reason, right? Because a lot of the growth that's been in crypto in the last 2 years, year and a half, 2 years, has been driven by a lot of Wall Street, VC, institutional money.
Which we've been saying. We've been saying that the market cap, make no mistake, that this market cap that's blown up to $1 trillion is clearly mostly institutional money at this
Right.
point. Whenever they decide to pull the plug and deflate, we're going to find a lot of,
Yep.
which is
So
what,
the
yeah.
point is that understanding the factors that determine the flows of institutional money. Thinking big one is the interest rate cycle, and quantitative tightening, that would make a difference, right? So having a view on those big picture things, the macro picture, is how you get a read on what's going to happen in crypto, because of how tightly connected these things are. And we're getting some of the first signs of information and data out of the U.S. economy for the first quarter of the year, and it's not looking good. We're seeing a contraction. Inventories are piling up because consumer spending is dropping. Companies are having goods sitting on the shelves longer than they're expecting. Higher inventories. There's trade deficit was starting to widen at the beginning of the year, which means that we were importing much more than we typically, and versus the exports, right? The ratio of imports to exports was worsening, so that we were spending more than we were selling for the beginning of the year. And all that kind of makes sense given the supply chain globalism fracture that's occurred through COVID and the war in Ukraine. So not surprised. And of course, the inventories piling up is a direct reflection of the lower consumer spending happening. So these things make complete sense, and it's all adding up to a contraction in economic activity, a 1.6% annualized contraction over the first quarter of the year. Now, the good news, there's always a little bright spot, and the bright spot is that as the year went on, and as we got into May and April, there seemed to be a revision in activity, right? So exports increased, things started to look a little better. Personal income stayed the same relatively, but there's some easing of the conditions and the bounce. But the problem is that the bounce started losing momentum because of the Fed's aggressive rate hike policy. And that's the point we've been making, is that markets tend to work themselves out if left to their own devices, right? So inflation, high prices over time, that works itself out, because as consumers face higher energy prices, higher fuel prices, higher food prices, that's money they don't have for other expenditures, right? And then that means that demand tends to be reduced. And then as demand is reduced, inventories pile up, and companies start to think, well, we better, start marking prices down so we can, have some sales to move out the inventory. So, and then as they do that, the price inflation starts to become more, starts to reduce, go down. So there's this natural self-correction process, but the Fed can either work with that, or they can work against it and try to change the natural process. And many times in history have gotten it wrong, and jumped on the gas too hard when they shouldn't have, and jumped on the brakes too hard when they shouldn't have. And so my fear is that because of how much the supply chain story, the supply shock story is driving this, that relying on the Fed and really hardcore rate hikes, I feel like might be misguided, because it could end up reducing the momentum in the economy, in the real economy, the spending, the hiring, and inadvertently make the situation worse.
So I'm getting two takeaways. One, the good news is there are solutions, but maybe with all that we've learned in the past, aggressive rate hikes might not be the best. One is continue more of a hard stance on tariff reduction and freeing up the supply chain, the economy there. And the other, I would say, is how effective are rate hikes that you drastically announce one after another versus maybe a longer approach, a more methodic approach, a more open approach to a 5-year, 10-year slow interest rate return that allows businesses and people to plan around it, where the effects might be more minute and more efficient over time. Because really it's like, oh, we're going to raise it 2 point, 200, 100 basis points, 150 basis points, 70, how much time do each one of these actions have to take effect in the economy before you layer on another rate hike? And so
yeah, it definitely feels like throwing everything at the problem all at once is the kind of approach they're taking right now.
Another thing I would say is, I think if you type this in, Jerome Powell, we do not understand inflation. I think there was an article I saw recently, but the big news is the Fed is admitting they don't understand inflation as much as they thought they did. How little, that's right. We understand something about admitting how little they understand inflation. Now, there we go. And this is kind of to what you were saying, is that he's working with the Fed, how little can be controlled with the price stability versus how much control they have with rate hikes and reserve ratios and with monetary policy. Monetary policy, while heavily correlated to inflation, isn't the only isn't the only factor. So and also, we did a video a long time ago, and we want to keep giving a shout out because we really want to bridge together modern traditional economics with the new blockchain innovations and where they come together. And as we love to talk about economics and inflation and monetary theory, a natural harmony there with helping understand measuring inflation better is another hot topic among economists for many years, has been CPI, consumer price index. It's always changing, whether they measure this basket, they put this much weight in energy, or omit food and omit this. How accurate is inflation being measured? There's been a lot of news over the accuracy of inflation metrics being higher than what's being reported. And here we're starting to see how blockchain cryptocurrency technology can take away some of that human error or that arbitrariness and put something that's a little bit more transparent and more accurate. And we'll continue. Obviously, all links are below because this is education and research channel. None of what we say is investment advice, commercial advice, legal advice. It's all education, entertainment. This is a new language, new knowledge, new technology, and we are learning and sharing that together. And we feel there are many, many opportunities. And for us, it's just look, this is one of them. How exciting is it to see these new effective tools that can communicate cross jurisdictions, cross boundaries on a more open, transparent
way. Yep. Yeah, I know that the CPI has a lot of clever ways of understating inflation. Food and housing, I believe, are either underweighted or sometimes excluded. So there's a lot of little things they do to get the number that they want. And you clearly see that when you include a more comprehensive basket, you get a much higher number. So I definitely think this is an important resource and will be useful along with the official statistics to kind of get a grander picture of what's going on. I guess we can wrap it up by saying, take a look at the crypto markets, see that, things are more or less moving sideways right now. Bitcoin's below 20, probably. And what's the takeaway here is that I do think that the contraction in the traditional economy, the Main Street economy, and the Wall Street side of it as well, this is going to drive prices lower. And even though we've seen over the last 6 months a lot of the valuation we've come off the highs by a large amount. Some of these projects are 80-90% off their highs. I do think that we could see things go a little lower, and that even Bitcoin and Ethereum are going to potentially most likely go lower, and that there is going to be one of the best opportunities ever to get into these projects. And it's not one of these deals where you just want to buy everything that you see, because some of these projects won't necessarily pump again, or not, maybe not use that term, but they might not go through.
The Zoom cut you off real quick.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
You kind of got chopped up. Yeah.
You got me now? Okay. So my point is that in the next bull market, it's not obvious that Solana or Cardano or any of these, really Tron, will be in the top 15, 20 projects, right? There might be something else that comes up that you never thought, or you didn't see coming. Things will, dynamic. And so this is the time to see the protocols and the projects and the blockchains that are doing the innovation and the development even during the bear market. And I think we have our own biases. You can follow us to see what we like, but I know the IBC and Secret and the Cosmos ecosystem is definitely one of the ones we think is going to be in the next.
Wherever there's innovation, we look to cover, and definitely Ethereum and EVM, Avalanche, Polygon, and layer 2 solutions. There's going to be a lot there. But as you said, I think that Polkadot, I really feel if you pull up the map of zones, speaking of our bias, one of the gems in our research that we share all the time, we've been covering for quite some time, is that due to how siloed blockchain has been for many years, and interoperability has been a major goal for different projects. The advent, the design, the whole community of the IBC is really thriving, continues to thrive. And I feel there are many opportunities. We've already covered, we'll continue to cover some. I mean, you look at Secret Network, one of my favorite
playlists.
We have playlists dedicated specifically to Secret. They're NFTs. They're working with people in Hollywood, and they can do things that you cannot do on any other blockchain because of privacy being innate. And there are other blockchains, EVMOS, bridging together the Atom Cosmos ecosystem, IBC, with Ethereum. So we're seeing interoperability without the high risk bridges that have been infamous for a lot of hacks and missing funds. So for that security, that interoperability, IBC, I feel very strongly will continue to put out some solid blockchains that can tap into other blockchains. But there are definitely some other projects that we have followed and will continue to follow, as well as tools to help you follow, us being one of them. So if you like this kind of stuff and you enjoy this and you want to give us a little love, you know what to do. Thumbs up, notification bell. Did we cover it pretty much?
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
Until the next time, have a beautiful day, and namaste, y'all.
Thank you.